Identifying as a jingoist is like identifying as a complete moron who spent 5 minutes thinking out your political positions and never bothered with introspection. Jingoism is, for anyone who doesn't know, basically an ideology of highly aggressive and immoral nationalism, which both justifies and enacts all the oppression, exploitation, and extreme cruelty that you can imagine. Here my goal, however, is not simply to prove that Jingoism is immoral. I am going to prove that it is completely and utterly stupid, and one of the most incoherent ideologies that there is. Jingoism's immorality is obvious. It is an ideology which aggressively justifies any cruelty, so long as it is in the perceived interests of the nation. This can include anything from war crimes to oppression and exploitation. The jingoist will swiftly respond, "Why would I care if it is in my nation's interest?" It is here that we see the incoherence of jingoism emerge. The jingoist will argue that in-group out-group competition is an inevitable reality, and that we should embrace any immorality whenever it suits us and our in-group interest. It is important to note that when conversing with jingoists, appeals to morality and the greater good on their own are completely useless. These people are immoral. They do not care if genocide hurts people. They are bloodthirsty lunatics. Exposing them as immoral does not achieve much. Exposing them as stupid, meanwhile, sounds a lot smarter to me. It also sounds a lot funner. Nothing exposes idiocy better than inconsistencies and contradictions. The jingoist will loudly proclaim, "Who cares if it is immoral if it is in my nation's interest?" They have accepted selfishness. To disprove said selfishness, we first need to find the inconsistency, a weakness to exploit. Thankfully, in the case of jingoism, finding this weakness is not very difficult. The jingoist does not claim, "Who cares if it is immoral so long as it is in my individual interest?" If they did, they would not be a jingoist, so much as a ruthless capitalist or an organized criminal. Most jingoists, you see, are inconsistent because for no apparent reason, they draw the line for acceptable selfishness at the in-group. They do not take the only consistent paths of always embracing immoral selfishness or always condemning it. Their ideology is fundamentally inconsistent and incoherent. It sits directly in between the only two consistent paths. It relies on drawing a line for acceptable selfishness at a completely illogical place. If it is okay to be selfish when in your interest, why is it not okay for someone in your in-group to become a brutal capitalist and start exploiting other members of the in-group if doing so is in their interest? The answer is that once you have accepted jingoist logic, there is no consistent way of condemning this. All those brutal capitalists who exploit their own in-group are just like you, only more logical. They have followed the idea that selfish immorality is fine to a logical conclusion, unlike you, who is wandering dazed at a crossroads between the only logical positions: complete condemnation or complete acceptance of selfish immorality. You have embraced the idea that immoral selfishness is fine, and this is what you asked for. You have justified your own enslavement, your own oppression and exploitation. You have justified the cruelty of all around you when only it is in their interest. If a nation can oppress and exploit, then logically an individual is justified in doing the same. There is no consistent way of drawing up a logical boundary between the two. Yet the stupid jingoist insists on drawing the line for acceptable selfishness at the line of some in-group for literally no logical reason. As I have remarked before, they are fools dancing at a crossroads between two consistent approaches: complete condemnation of immoral selfishness or complete embrace of immoral selfishness. They choose neither. They choose inconsistency. Their ideology is fundamentally inconsistent and an incoherent joke. If they are consistent, they must choose a path, but feeling like they belong to something bigger than themselves is more important than consistency. Feeling like their sad life is part of some grand in-group out-group struggle comes before any semblance of rationality. I hope you can recognize this fundamental contradiction that makes jingoism so stupid. Most jingoists are nothing but fools who have drawn a completely irrational standard for when immoral selfishness is acceptable. Now I have proven the idiocy and incoherence of jingoism, I want to finally look at the two consistent positions. Selfish immorality is always fine, or it never is. I ask you one question. What society do you choose to live in? A society where everyone believes selfish immorality is wrong and treats others as they like to be treated? Or a society where everyone does whatever is in their own selfish interest, with no moral consideration whatsoever? I know what society I or any other rational actor would aim for, and spoiler alert, it is at odds with the immoral selfishness that jingoism justifies. Humans are social beings that rely on reciprocal morality. It is in our own interest to treat others as we want to be treated, as this ensures others do the same for us, and the greatest good for all, including ourselves, is guaranteed by this social transaction. This age-old idea is central to Christianity's golden rule, and bears similarities with the Eastern idea of karma, as well as countless similar ideas, both secular and religious, from across the globe. It is in your selfish interest to not act immorally, as this is an essential part of the moral transaction of reciprocal morality, which guarantees the best outcome for you and everybody that you care about. Jingoism represents an idiotic and illogical assault on reciprocal morality. If followed to a logical conclusion, its underlying justifications of selfish immorality leads to a war of all against all, as all desperately and blindly pursue their interests to the detriment of others. This is logic which justifies your own slavery, oppression, and exploitation. If only someone can benefit off of it, which they can. People being cruel to you is something which people can benefit off of in the immediate short term. Be careful when you endorse the idea that immoral selfishness is fine. When applied consistently across the board, this idea could have some very detrimental outcomes for you and the people you care about. Selfishness may bring some immediate gain for some, but long-term constant selfishness will completely implode the moral order. Perhaps consider that for just a moment before you promote logic which justifies not just the slavery, oppression, and exploitation of another, but also the slavery, oppression, and exploitation of you and everyone you care about. Supporting jingoism is idiotic, as it clashes with the most basic moral ideas a rational actor should seek to uphold for their own sake. Jingoism is an immoral ideology of oppression, exploitation, and cruelty. It is incoherent and irrational, as it and its adherents draw a completely inconsistent standard for what immoral selfishness is deemed acceptable. It clashes with the most basic moral ideas any rational actor ought to seek to promote for their own sake. Jingoism is a complete joke of an ideology.